House of the Dragon seems more mythical than Game of Thrones. It seems more fantastical than Game of Thrones, and it hopefully seems more different from Season 8. This show is a prequel, its history is already written, the ink is dry. Though ironically, it is kind of the next big step forward in the Game of Thrones universe. It's a chance to revive the franchise and bring us back to the world we know and love. And this teaser is getting me quite excited, but before we jump into that, let's start with a light overview of the series. So on the timeline, this is set about 200 years before Robert's Rebellion. At this point, we haven't seen the decline of House Targaryen, as most of its dragons are still alive, and the Targaryens still have an unshakable place of power in Westeros. It is the events of the story we're about to see that actually make it possible for Robert to overthrow the Targaryens in the first place. So we start with not the life, but the death of the current king, Viserys Targaryen. As most civil wars start, it's around the succession of the throne, and it's made up by two factions, the Greens and the Blacks. The Blacks Targaryen faction is headed up by Rhaenyra Targaryen, the daughter of the former king, who named her as his successor upon his death. In her early life, she was married into House Velaryon, but her husband died and then she remarried Daemon Targaryen, the brother to her father, King Viserys. You gotta remember, Targaryens keep their friends close, their enemies closer, and their family in their beds. Rhaenyra, being the daughter to the former king, being named his successor, and having a well-established position in the Targaryen house, should have made the ascension quite simple, if not for the ambition of Queen Alicent Hightower, the former wife to King Viserys, who claims her son is the rightful successor, with him being the eldest male heir. Yes, the greatest civil war in Targaryen history was a feud between a stepmother and a daughter. Alicent's father, Otto Hightower, is also the hand of the king to Viserys, showing how her faction, the Greens, are well placed to put up a decent fight against Rhaenyra. With magic and dragons ever more present in this timeline, this clash between Targaryen factions will be more fantastical and epic than anything we've ever seen on Game of Thrones so far. So let's look at the teaser.
Gods, kings.
King Viserys on the Iron Throne, Otto Hightower with the much recognizable pin of the Hand of the King, and Balon the Black Dread, no longer just a skull under the Red Keep. So yes, this is unapologetically a Game of Thrones story. So we get this narration coming in from Matt Smith playing Prince Daemon Targaryen, as we see him carrying this torch through some caverns and appearing on the shore of Dragonstone with his wife Rhaenyra, clearly indicating that this show wants to make him a very significant character that we're going to put a lot of focus on. I thought it was quite clever how they overlap this shot of Balerion as the narration says gods. House Targaryen marries their own family, floats any rule they like, and every lord in all the Seven Kingdoms pledge fealty to them, because they have dragons. Dragons are the only gods the Targaryens have ever needed. And looking at that, I can see why.
Fire. And blood.
Blood and fire aren't just the house words of Targaryen, it's how they lived, it's how they ruled. I didn't know how exactly they were going to tackle this really broad story that encompasses a huge time span, but it seems from these shots here that we have a young Rhaenyra. So it could be that we're dealing with multiple timelines or lots of flashbacks, filling in the much needed context we need for the prelude to this civil war. This conflict almost brings the end of the Targaryen line and all of its dragons. So it'd be critical to understand how this feud started between Rhaenyra and Alicent and why they felt it was so necessary to engage in this bloody war. And it seems from the shot we get of this fight that we may be getting a peek at a major tournament that shows us just that. Oh, and just let's take a moment to appreciate how amazing the Targaryen armor looks. Like, they've always got it on point. Okay, heaps to cover there. We're going to see a lot from the early parts of the story, with Laenor Velaryon, Rhaenyr's first husband, and his father, a prominent lord by Dragonstone, at what appears to be a banquet in the Red Keep. If we look closely, we see the blue seahorse banner of House Velaryon next to the Targaryen one on the other side. And with the series still alive and at the head of the table, this makes me believe this could be some sort of celebration of Rhaenyra's proposal or marriage into House Targaryen. We also get a glimpse at another recognizable blade from Game of Thrones with young Queen Alicent carrying Littlefinger and then Arya's dagger. And if there wasn't enough nostalgia running through you, we get more shots from this joust, like Sam's House Tarly, the Starks, and even the Lannisters. Just enough of everything to get your brain spinning back into Game of Thrones mode.
Dreams didn't make us kings. Dragons did.
Dreams didn't make us kings. Dragons did. The story we know is of the Starks and the Lannisters, lords who held up the symbols of the Iron Throne of Westeros only out of ritual and tradition. But this is a story about the House of the Dragons, about the people who built Westeros, who forged the Iron Throne, not who adopted it. And nothing reflects that more than seeing the Iron Throne in its full glory, looking a lot more pointier and a lot more like the book description. So the House of the Dragon, what do you think?